Welcome to Single Daddy Daily. I'm Evan DeMarco here with my great friend Drew Manning, and you guessed it, we are single dads. I've got a 5-year-old daughter, and Drew's got 2 daughters, 9 and 7.
How do we juggle the responsibilities of raising our kids, co-parenting, working, and even dating? Season 1 of the Single Daddy Daily podcast is the honest and complicated journey of 2 guys navigating the waters of single parenthood. Join me, I'm Drew, and Evan in a raw look at what it takes to balance a successful career, dating, and most importantly, being a present parent. Together or with guests, we're going to tackle many of the difficult topics that so many of us parents face.
On this show, we are coming at you with stories, interviews, and more to discuss a topic that affects almost half of all people who get married and have kids: what it's like to be a single parent.
So today we have a special guest on the Single Daddies Daily podcast. Here with Evan, of course. Evan and Drew, your hosts.
Drew and Evan.
Yeah, and Drew and Evan. What did I say?
Evan and Drew.
I was
what
yeah.
flows better?
I think Drew goes before. It's D before E, right?
Yes.
It's alphabetical.
Did you say it? Drevin?
Drew and Evan.
Drevin. Okay. As you can tell, we have a female voice on the podcast today. Heidi Powell is in the house. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are
excited to have you.
Are you?
Seriously.
Yes, very excited.
Am I the first female on your podcast?
Yes.
Okay. That makes me happy.
You're also the first person that we've bred on the podcast.
Yeah, not only are you the first female, you are the
first.
first guest.
Yes, you're the first guest, so no pressure.
I'm good. Ask away. I'm an open book.
We got a lot of deep questions.
We're going to have some fun today.
Yeah, we are going to get into social penetration.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds interesting.
There's actually something interesting about this. So social penetration theory is a theory that was developed about how people get to know each other in social settings.
Okay.
And it's actually uses an onion as kind of the catalyst for the visual representation of this. So the outer layers of the onion are superficial things like where did you grow up, what are your favorite movies, music, books, and then the deeper into the onion you go, it's deeper stuff like, deeply held beliefs, religious convictions, favorite sexual positions, things like that. I might have made that last part up.
So we're going deep here.
We're going
deep. And along the way, as we talk about social penetration, the whole point of this podcast is to get to know you as a single parent and now as a married parent with kids from 2 different guys, and how did you go about that whole process? How did that work for you? What are the challenges? And so I think as a lot of single parents make that transition from married, divorced, and then possibly considering getting back into a relationship again, there's a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot, well, is this going to work again? Am I broken? Am I beyond repair?
Yeah.
And we had the fortune last night of really getting to know you at dinner while Mr. Keto had a lot of bread.
Hey,
I just want to throw that out there.
But
keto
he ran
bread. Hold
35
on.
miles.
I ran 35 miles.
And it was keto bread.
It was keto bread anyways, so we're good.
And it was only like 1 roll.
That's what the waiter told me. He said it was keto, so it's the placebo effect.
Yeah. And we were at a restaurant called Meat, so I guess that worked.
I think
Exactly.
It was a roll made of meat.
No, we had a great time, but I would love for you, Heidi, for those that might not know you, kind of introduce yourselves, who you are, connect the dots for us of how you became Heidi Powell.
Yeah, so my name is Heidi Powell. So I'm married to Chris Powell, and a lot of people...
Never heard of him.
Just kidding. Who he is?
Oh, Chris.
Oh, I'm totally joking.
And actually, so we had a show on ABC for 5 years called Extreme Weight Loss, where we help people lose half their body weight over the course of a year. Drew was actually one of our first big special guests was Drew.
Yeah.
And it was definitely one of the most fulfilling things. It started as I was just Chris's wife behind the scenes trying to help him stay afloat and train people. I was a trainer and he was the host of the show. So we created it. He was the host of the show. And I mean, Drew, you know this because you had a TV show. With a show comes a ton of media, and it comes the filming days and you being the star of the show. That's a job in and of itself. So add to it, Chris was training 8 to 16 people at a time, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it with even one when he had to be the face. So naturally, husband and wife combo. I was kind of his support system. I'm somewhat of a fixer, which is how I met Chris. I wanted to fix him.
Well, that brings up a whole other topic.
We could go a lot of different areas. But over time, so season 2 and then season 3, they brought me on a little bit more. And by that time, I was the co-host of the show with Chris. It ran 5 full years, which was amazing. When the show was in production, we shot year round and we trained year round. So there was zero opportunity to do anything and actually help people. So we could inspire millions, but we couldn't actually help them change their lives. And so we ended up, after the show was canceled, creating our app and our Transform ecosystem where people could actually go to change their lives. And we have 40,000 people actively transforming today inside of the app. But
wow.
So that's about like the business side. That's Heidi Powell, right? That the world knows. But
Tell us about Heidi Lane.
Heidi Lane, which is actually my real last name. So I have never taken on Chris's last name.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
really?
It is actually Heidi Lynn Lane is my name.
Lynn's your middle name?
Yes.
How did I not know this?
Is that funny, Drew?
That's a little bit interesting.
We're jumping into the onion quick.
We are. But
Gotcha.
so I have, it actually revolves around my kids and my divorce. So I was Heidi Lane at birth, changed my name to Heidi Solomon when I married my first husband. We had 2 kids together who are Maddox and Marley Solomon. When Chris and I got married and I was pregnant with Cash, I hadn't yet changed my name, but I was close. It just took time because we were busy traveling and filming the show. But it was about a month before Cash was born. Marley was in tears, having the hardest time because she's like, we're going to be Solomons and you and Chris and this new baby, you guys are all going to be Powells. And that was like, for me, an emotional moment. And I told her, I'm like, Marley, no, you're going to be a Solomon. Chris is going to be a Powell, Cash is going to be a Powell, and I'm going to be a Lane. So we're all different and unique, and we come together and make the Powell pack. Like this is our family right here. Last name doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I refused from that moment forward, and Chris is 1,000,000% on board. I actually refused to change my name to Powell, so it will never be Powell. The world thinks I'm Heidi Powell.
Yeah.
You know, this brings up like so many different
I have so many
topics.
questions.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so many questions.
Well, you might just have to be a permanent co-host on the show.
Single daddies and a mommy.
And one mom.
Single parents daily. Single parents daily, although you're not single.
Yeah.
But I was.
Okay, we'll work on the naming later.
Single daddies and a married mommy daily.
Yeah.
Well, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
We'll have to shorten it somehow.
Acronym or a really big business card.
I would love for you to kind of bring it back and walk us through, you know, what it was like for you being married for the first time, going through a divorce.
Yeah.
And going through a divorce, having 2 kids. Because, you know, you brought up the fact about Marley. And this is one of my fears about having more kids is will my daughters feel like they're separate from this other family entity because they're only with me 50% of the time, but I'll be with this new baby 100% of the time. Yeah. And will they get jealous? Will they be upset? I have so many questions about that. But let's start with your first marriage.
I want to talk about,
what it was like going through that divorce for you emotionally, and then having kids, and then transition into dating again. Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm really not good at filtering. So I'm just going to be totally open and raw. And
yes,
sometimes I'm like, gosh, how is this going to translate to the end user?
Well, that's fine. If it gets too deep, we'll have a safe word.
Cinnamon.
Cinnamon, yes. Cinnamon is the safe word.
Not mushrooms. Like your coffee.
I do have mushrooms in my coffee, but not those mushrooms. Chaga and reishi.
Yeah. The safe ones.
The safe ones.
So actually, I was married to Derek.
And
I'm going to try and be super sensitive to him too, knowing that
Naturally.
he might
no,
listen,
we totally
and
respect
I really do respect. And it's I will say this: he will always be the dad of my 2 kids, and for that I will always love him. And this is something, you guys. If I cry today, I apologize because of course family is like a big deal to me. So Derek and I were married for about 5 years, and I met him at 19.
And you guys were Mormon.
We were Mormon. I was raised Mormon. He was raised Mormon. I met him at 19, and at 19, I don't think many of us know who we are. Not even close.
I don't think at 25 or 35 or
yeah. No, and we're continually evolving, but at the time I was raised, I shared this with you last night, in a family where I didn't have a lot of power. And it was okay because I knew I was loved. My dad protected us and cared for us, and he was the power in our family. And so I didn't understand my voice. I didn't understand that I had opinions. I didn't know anything about myself. For me, it was about making people feel good, which I still have that weakness to an extent. Mm-hmm. But I remember I married.
Do you think that's a weakness?
It can be. And I'll tell you,
I know
it
what you
can
mean by
be
that, yeah.
because with Derek, in hindsight, we were never right for each other. Granted, we're happy it worked because we have 2 amazing kids, but I think we were both trying to maybe fix or complete the other instead of complete ourselves first.
I love that.
I found myself trying to complete him and trying to make him, because he has such a good heart and he was great with kids. And I remember seeing him and being like, oh my gosh, someday I'm going to have him be this. And that. I thought, and you talked about this last night. You said women marry men for who they think they're going to be or who they want them to be, and men marry women for who they are or something like that. And it was completely that on my side. So married for 4 years and a religious family. So you don't even think outside of your walls. You have these 2 walls and you like stay in the walls and You don't walk outside of them. And it wasn't until my dad actually overdosed about 4 years into mine and Derek's marriage.
Wow.
And it broke our family outside of that wall. So my mom and dad, I didn't know this, but they kind of lived a different life than the Mormon life outside of our understanding. So my little bubble at that time had completely burst, and it was the most wonderful thing. I can't even, my dad overdosed and lived, surprisingly, 3 more years, and then he passed away after. But it was him coming to terms, because it was really tough for him to have the world know that he was weak and he had overdosed and he was having financial issues, and it was like a secret for a minute. And then he ended up doing a 30-day inpatient rehab, and my eyes were opened so much in that, just to what really matters in life and what builds love and what creates happiness. And that for me was an eye-opener. I can't explain what it was. We had issues inside of our marriage, and I could say, I divorced Derek because of this. I left him because of this. But the reality is, even if those things were fixed that maybe he was dealing with, I still knew at that time he and I were 2 different people. And I also knew what my kids were seeing at home. I was able to identify and have an opinion because of, kind of what I went through with my dad. What my kids were seeing at home was not the marriage I wanted them to have. Yeah. And I believe kids naturally will look for a partner like they see in their parent.
Oh, absolutely.
And they'll look to treat their spouse. So they'll look to treat their husband. A daughter might look to treat their husband the way that, her mom treats one of you guys, and vice versa. And so I knew that what we had was not what I wanted them to have. And there's a major sense of guilt. I chose to leave. Massive guilt.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about guilt and shame and how you dealt with that.
It actually probably haunted me for about 5 years.
Wow.
And maybe a little longer. And it wasn't the guilt or shame of leaving him, because I met Chris about 1.5 years after, so I knew right away that was meant to be. And we've had conversation about that. And I never really looked back, because I knew with Derek, I knew I was holding him back from being the best he could be, and I knew he was holding me back from being the best that I could be. The transition, the period of divorce was actually really tough for both of us, really hard. Even though I chose to leave, for him, it was like he had to figure out how to do all the things that a mom did and a wife did. And I held a really heavy load financially, just running a tight ship, whatever it was. And so he had to learn to pay bills. He had to learn all these things. I'm sure you guys
I can totally relate.
To do laundry. Yeah, he had to learn to do Marley's hair. He had to learn, and that
that's a challenge.
That hurt me more than anything, just knowing that he was at home trying to figure it out with my kids. But in the end, it was the best thing for us. I know I was going to say something else. Can't remember what it was. But the guilt and shame.
Guilt and shame.
Yeah, that lasted for a while, and it was me hurting him. Like I knew he didn't want.
Like you knew you hurt him by calling it quits.
Yeah, and I
even though he couldn't see it from your perspective.
Theory that maybe I think there's still stuff. It's been 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, and I think it's still tough for him.
Yeah. Well, this is the biggest dynamic in the whole divorce process, right? Is usually it's one person wanting it more than the other, and what does that do, and what are the ripple effects of that? And there's no right answer, right? Because we're all unique, we're all different, but each person deals with it in their own way. You kind of carry that guilt and around with you, but maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to him. But I think naturally, and I don't know about you, but there's always kind of that nagging thing in the back of your mind, like, what if? Like, should I have stayed? Should we have tried? And it doesn't matter if you could be 99.999% confident that leaving was the best, but when it comes to kids, at least in my experience, there's always that just tiny little nagging doubt. Should we have stayed? And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that was more a small thought. I will say small, just because I do think we are happier, both of us, separate. And you know us both.
Yeah.
And you could not find 2 people that are more opposite than each other. Maybe for a little bit, but when I met Chris, that definitely changed, because I do feel like my kids needed Chris's influence in their life. Not to say to replace Derek, because he's never even tried to replace, and he doesn't, and he's super aware and conscientious of that. But who Chris teaches them to be is, like I was telling you guys at dinner last night, it's who Chris teaches me to be.
Yeah.
It's a really amazing, like I want to be better because of Chris. And so I don't know at this point Derek and I would never work again.
Yeah.
But I think also, I mean, over the course since we met, because that was back in 2000 or 2001.
That was a while ago.
I
That's
am
a long time ago.
I am
Yeah.
a totally different
Yes.
person. And I'm a different person, though, too, from the time I met Chris to who I am today.
Yeah.
And so it's just this evolution of who we are. If you're not growing together,
You're growing apart.
you are. Yeah. And so, I mean, at this point,
Well-
nagging. The only guilt I had was, in my mind, I thought, and I still think this, my heart would rip out because Derek and Maddox remind me a lot of each other. And I don't have favorite kids, but they're all my favorite in a way. And Maddox and I are buddies. I love that kid so much. And if a girl, like, I know Derek was trying his hardest when he was married to me. And if a girl left him, I'd probably want to kill her. I probably would. And that's actually the part that hurt the most was thinking, gosh, breaking Derek's heart. What's this going to be like if one of my kids has to go through it someday? Because there's a really good chance that at least one of them will.
Yeah.
You hope, actually.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's a hard part, right? Because as parents, our natural instinct is to protect our kids, but ultimately growth comes from that kind of pain. And as you found out, you probably married your first love. And, I think that we kind of need to go through some of those heartaches to have successful relationships rather than going from, I'm a senior in high school to I'm getting married.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the Mormon church kind of perpetuates that a little bit.
Yeah.
But get your heart broken, live a little, and then find that person that, as you found out, now that you're in a successful, happy marriage, that sometimes you got to get your ass kicked first.
Yeah.
I
think there's two things really quickly, just because there's so many topics that we could talk about here. But first, you mentioned, and I think a lot of people stay married for their kids, right? And we've probably seen that. Well, for the greater good, I'll stay with this person that, even though we're miserable, we'll stick it out for the kids. And people think they're doing their kids a favor. But in reality, like you said, you're setting up an interesting example for them to see two people that are married but miserable. Mm-hmm. And they think, well, that's what marriage is like. It's just, there's no love. They're like roommates, buddies. And that's what marriage is supposed to look like. And so I like that you pointed that out. You're doing your kids a disservice by staying married, even though, you knew it was hard to make that decision. Right. And then the other thing I was going to mention is, with Lynn and I, becoming two different people. Like, people have asked me, well, how are you and Lynn such good friends? But why wouldn't you guys want to be together if you get along and we're good friends? I'm like, the people we are today isn't the same 25 and 21-year-old people that met that were like not innocent, but like naive, about who we were. And we're two totally different people, but we still maintain a good relationship, a good friendship. Yeah, the person I fell in love with isn't who she is today, and vice versa.
And I would venture to maybe even say the person you divorced is
100%.
not who she and you both are today.
Exactly. And it's because of what we went through, the affair, the divorce, that has helped us become who we are today.
Yeah.
So we both, at least for me, I won't speak for her, but I see everything that happened. I know this sounds bad, but the affair and us going through the ups and downs of that afterwards, and then the divorce, is a blessing in disguise. And it's so hard for people to see that, because they think that was a bad thing, you're a bad person, but so much good has come from it. And so sometimes in life, we don't realize that so much good can come from bad things. So like you were saying with Maddox, like, he's going to have to go through some bad things to learn who he is. And that's what's hard as a parent, is you want to protect your kids. You don't want them to go through bad things, because it hurts and it sucks. But we all know from experience that those are the greatest learning and growing moments in our life, is from the bad stuff.
It's so true. So when I divorced Derek, when Derek and I divorced, Maddox actually took it the hardest. So he was...
How old were they?
Yeah.
Maddox was 3 and Marley was almost 2.
Wow.
So I think when it was finalized, it might have been 3 and 2.
Yeah.
I mean, they were like they were young. They were really young.
Yeah.
And part of my thought process, because I've had so many friends and I still have them, and I've always had them, all ages, friends saying, oh, my marriage is miserable. Someday I'll leave, but we got to get the kids out of the house.
Oh, man.
And the people that have done that, the kids are just as impacted.
Even more so.
Because they've developed, I mean, they have this idea, and Chris is a product of a divorce after he and I were married. His parents got divorced, and it rocked his world because his whole life he has this like belief system that's been built around what he knows, and all of a sudden it's shattered.
It crumbles, yeah.
Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of try to avoid that and just say, okay, I'm not happy. The kids aren't happy. Derek's not happy. Let's do this now. And it was actually surprisingly tough on Maddox. And that was hard for me, like really hard for me. And I think Maddox from about 3 until 12. I mean, I have to try not to cry.
You're fine.
And I think that's
He'll take his shirt off. We don't have Kleenex, but
I'll use her shirt.
but Drew will take off his
Your
shirt.
pec
It
dance
seems
that
to
we were
always
doing
help out.
earlier. But
I just meant as a Kleenex.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's like,
Jeez.
to distract her from crying?
Well, you'll distract
okay.
me too. I think that shirt's containing packs.
But Maddox actually was he was like Cash as a baby and a kid, and like Ruby, and just super extroverted and had fun and was lively and hilarious and brilliant. And like, it was like a year after the divorce happened. And I remember him being at my house because I have about 80% custody and Derek has about 20, just because of how it works, with our lives. And I remember him not being able to comprehend and understand. I remember him laying in bed and just thinking, just having such a hard time not being with Dad. And he'd be like, where's Dad at? Where's Dad? And I didn't know how to explain it to him. But he went from like kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Actually, it progressively got worse over time. Kindergarten, first and second grade, he was like this straight A student, top of the class. Kids are like, he's like Mensa smart. He's so freaking brilliant. And then it was like second, third, fourth, like progressively. I mean, getting him through school up until like even this last year has just been so difficult. And seeing how introverted he was, and a lot of it happened when Chris came into the picture too, because there was confusion there, and we can talk about that at some point.
About that.
But yeah, he didn't break out of that until about 12. And it was the result of consistency, I believe. I would tell Chris, I'm like, we just got to keep showing him the same love, letting him know he's safe here. Because I think with a lot of kids, what happens is when you break up your family, they don't feel safe, number one. And number two, they feel like it's their fault. Yeah. And I realized that with Maddox, like he couldn't comprehend why he couldn't keep us together. But I will say the years of consistency and the positive influence that my happiness has had in his life and Chris has had in his life, he is the most incredible and one of the strongest humans I know, and he still has to deal with a lot of shit around the co-parenting situation. And the kid is literally, I've never met a 14-year-old as wise as him and as strong and this new confidence, but it was the result of him having to go through what he did and having to process it the way that he did.
When you got divorced, sorry to switch gears here because we're going to get back into the kids in a second. What were your fears going back into dating? Like, were you looking to get married right away? Like, what was it like for you? And then having kids? Because I'll just kind of tell you what my fears were when I first got divorced was like, I could find the perfect woman, fall in love with her, but if she doesn't like my kids or my kids don't like her, that's going to cause some serious issues. So now having kids, getting into dating again, it's a scary world because you want to protect your kids and you don't want them to get attached to someone that you might break up with them. And then your kids are like, well, mommy's gone and now this person's gone. And you keep going through more and more relationships that might not last forever.
Yeah.
I didn't want to expose my girls to that. So it took me a while to even date.
Yeah.
And so what was it like for you having 2 kids, getting into the dating scene, and what were your fears and how did you overcome them with Chris?
So this is a couple part question. When I decided to proceed with a divorce, I wanted to make sure it wasn't like the grass is greener on the other side with someone else. Yeah. And so the question I would ask myself is, am I better off alone or with my husband? And so when I had kind of weighed out and figured out and lived vicariously through my own imagination, I felt like alone was going to be happier for me than with, because I didn't want to depend on him. There was a big process of, I had to figure out who I was at that point, and I knew I was going to be diving into that big time because there's massive identity crisis out of this Mormon world for the first time. I didn't know that I would ever get married again, and I was pretty certain that I wouldn't because I didn't think marriage was for me. I think
sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yep.
I kind of felt like if I can't make it work, like you feel broken. Even if it's your choice, whether you're left or you choose to leave, you feel like something's wrong with you because you can't conform to society's idea of what marriage is. So yeah, I didn't think I'd ever get married again, but I also am a people pleaser, and I struggled with putting my foot down back in the day. especially after my marriage, because I, again, went from a Mormon bubble to being married to now I'm like actually an adult in in the real world at 26 years old, drinking for the first time in my life, like doing things for the first time ever that I didn't even know was around. And I couldn't say no to people.
Yeah.
There's shame and guilt associated with that I've had to get rid of with regard to my kids, because I couldn't tell even guys no on a date, or when they wanted to meet my kids, and I for about 3 months exposed my kids to too much just because I had not been prepped for this real world. That landed me in a self-improvement seminar. I decided something's freaking wrong with me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell every guy in line at Starbucks that wanted to it was Starbucks back then, that wanted to go out with me, I would say yes to. I could not say no. And then if they wanted a second, third, fourth date, I had to say yes to it, because if I said no, I'd be breaking their heart. And I just broke Derek's heart, and I can't break another guy's heart. It was just this torment. And so I actually started seeing a therapist, and I swore off men. And the self-improvement seminar that they sent me to, that he had me do, is actually where I met Chris.
Interesting.
And we didn't date for the first 6 months of our relationship. We were just best friends, because I didn't want to date. I didn't want to be, I wanted to learn to say no to people and learn, because I didn't love myself at all. And I thought by saying yes to these men, they would love me. And if they love me, then it means I'm lovable. But it was actually just making me, I had zero control over my life.
When did online dating begin?
That's a good question. I feel like it would have been.
I'm guessing Tinder was the first one, or Match?
I don't know.
No, I think it was eHarmony back in the day.
Oh,
right?
So there was eHarmony, and I think Match.com, but they were all .coms, right? So you had to go to a computer probably. And,
before a phone.
Yeah.
It says 1994.
Oh.
1994.
Wow, okay.
I was in high school. I had the Zach Morris brick phone.
AOL was just
America
Online.
Online. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I remember Tinder was big when we were shooting the show, because our producers and our camera guys and all of our whole team, they would be on Tinder. And I'm like, what the hell is Tinder? What are they doing? Swiping or whatever the heck goes on. Chris had to explain to me. He's like, they're looking for local chicks in the area. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that was so new to me.
Funny, I know.
But yeah, and that was back in 2010 or 11. So Tinder must have been around then. And that was the app. It was Tinder back then. Is that still the one?
Tinder's still around.
Are you guys on Tinder?
No.
I haven't done online dating.
I told people in the other podcast I did Bumble for about a month, but it became too overwhelming. It was too hard to keep up with everyone, and I just couldn't do it.
I have a friend that I don't even know which one it is. Maybe Bumble, maybe Tinder.
Yeah.
And to me, every time I see him open it up, I feel like it just depresses him more. Because you're literally...
It's an addiction.
Yeah. Oh,
it literally is an addiction.
They make it addictive.
Yeah.
And,
it's like a slot machine, right? It's that...
by a photo. You just can't.
There's 4 or 5 photos.
And I don't photograph well. There are. So there's one photo.
And they're all the best ones
of them.
And
if you think she looks great, you can swipe up, right? And her other photos are down there or something like that.
Yeah. So you swipe up, see
we were
the
just
other
looking
ones.
at it last night.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was
you were doing
helping
your
him
homework?
swipe left and right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Way to come prep for
I
the
know.
show.
Exactly.
We like that kind of preparation for Single Daddy
I'm like,
Daily.
I need to do this. I'm doing Single Daddies Daily tomorrow. Pull up Bumble.
So getting back to you and Chris,
yeah,
bringing Chris into the fold with you and your kids, and knowing that he was going to have to meet your ex, what was it like at first? Did he meet your kids first? Did he meet your ex first? Did you and your ex have rules about hey, if you're bringing someone that's spending time with the kids, I want to meet them? What was it like when Chris met Derek for the first time, and how did you navigate those waters?
Chris met the kids first, and he met the kids first. Chris and I were actually not dating at the time. We knew though. And I mentioned this to you guys, but from an early time, Chris and I knew we would be in each other's lives forever. We just knew. And we would say, I think we're life partners. I think even if I'm married to someone else, you are forever, just because we had such a massive appreciation for each other and who each of us made the other become. So Chris actually met Marley first as a result of helping me. Mm-hmm. I was at the DMV one day, and there was this kind of stalker guy, and I think he was homeless maybe, and I was a little bit scared, and so I actually ended up calling Chris to help because I didn't know who else to call.
Yeah.
And Chris lived a couple miles away, so he ended up coming and just sitting there with us for a while, and that was the first time he met Marley. But that was about 6 or 8 months after he and I met. So I went a really long, and we were dating at that point.
Okay.
Wait, no, we were not. So it was right on the border of when we started dating.
Gotcha.
Well, nothing brings two people together like hanging out at the DMV.
Like
Yes.
That's
like
love,
fighting
right?
off crazy people.
That's love. Like
It's a great
fighting
bonding
off
moment.
crazy people.
no, that's not. It's not the fighting off crazy people. It's coming to the DMV. That is
It's a very
love.
romantic
Like,
place.
yeah.
Yes. It's where a lot of people
listeners
get
out there,
married.
if anyone ever shows up to the DMV for you, marry that person.
That's pretty much what it was.
Yeah, because no one should ever have to go to the DMV.
No. And he was awesome, and he wanted to kind of help and protect. But shortly thereafter, we did decide that I was going to bring, I think it was just Marley. Marley was the one that got a lot of Chris first, to dinner with us. And so that's when, and to him, the scariest part about me was that I was a mom. Like, to me, the scariest part about him was knowing I have 2 kids and you have this incredible mission to save the world. He never planned on being a family man ever. And he was just so mission driven. And like, I mean, it guides his head and his mind more than anything. And he didn't think happiness was ever possible in a family setting. And I didn't know that I wanted that to raise my kids.
Yeah.
I was terrified of that. And he was scared of me and the fact that I had kids, you know. And so actually he ended up saying, okay, bring Marley to dinner just so we can kind of see what it's like. Okay. And he would tell you to this day that the time he actually fell in love with me was the time he said I was outside of his house, walking up to the front door.
I remember him telling me
this.
Yeah.
And he said he saw me kneel down and fix Marley's hair and adjust her clothes and just give her love and come up to his door. And he said that was the moment I knew you were the one for me. Yeah. And he's like, and it like that, the thing that was my biggest fear, you having kids or a woman having kids, became the thing that attracted me to you the most.
Interesting.
It's amazing how that changes.
And he is a different person today as a result of him parenting my kids and learning the ropes from that. Like, I mean, talk about, being a parent to somebody else's kids, especially for the first time, can completely shift who you are as a person. And it changes the way that you love and who you are. I know you had questions about what's it like to kind of have kids after, you know. Yeah. I don't know if we want to dive into that.
No,
now,
I would love to, if that's okay.
No, yeah, no.
No, we can dive into that. Yeah, what's it like to have...
We're getting into the onion one way or another.
Like, bring other kids
like
into the
3
fold,
layers
because I've
deep.
thought about this. Like, you know, I don't want my girls to feel like they're on the outside. I don't want them to be jealous of these new kids that I have if I were to have more kids. Yeah. And be like, well, that's not fair. You get to be with your new kid all the time, and we're left, 50% of the time, and they feel like they're on the outside. And I don't want that for them, or I didn't want that for them. But seeing what you guys do and how you do it is an example to me and a lot of people out there. Like, I'm not planning on having kids, but I will never say never because I don't know. And I have fears about it. But seeing what you guys do is really remarkable.
Well, and so interestingly enough, I was the oldest of 4, and the 2 youngest kids were from a different dad.
Oh, wow.
So I went through that same process.
interesting.
And it was really interesting where when my mom remarried, Dad was my dad. So, it happened really young. Yeah. So I was 3 when my parents got divorced, and so she remarried, I think, when I was 4. It was pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of grew up with Dad as my dad. And then there was that paradigm shift when my mom got pregnant with the next girl. And it took a while for it to happen because I really remember my dad kind of falling in love with the family unit, and there was just something that was so... I mean,
your dad, meaning the new man.
The new dad, my stepdad. And then I don't think it was a conscious shift. I think that he kind of came from a world where he couldn't really process a lot of feelings and emotions. And so when he had 2 kids of his own, there was a noticeable paradigm shift there where it's like, okay, we felt, my sister and I, from the first dad, biological dad, felt a little bit of an outsider in the family unit. And I know that there's a lot of kids that have talked about this, is when you kind of start meshing families, kind of creating these modern families, is how do you deal with the ramifications of emotional blowback like that?
That's actually, and I love hearing your thoughts and your perspective on that, because you are where Maddox is. You were where Maddox is. And as you say it, I'm like, gosh, it would be really awesome to get him in a room without me and have someone ask questions so we actually know how he feels. And I do know for a while, it's a balancing act. So the way that we have it today, it is very much a balancing act. Because when Chris was introduced to the kids, he could try to love them as much as possible, but they weren't going to love him back the way that they love their dad.
Yeah.
And there was, for Chris, it was really difficult because he would be like, this is hopeless. This is hopeless. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And we were either married or close to married at that time. And I just kept telling him, be consistent. Just be consistent and be consistent. The best thing for us, and I also could see Chris analyzing it from a situation of someone that had never been a parent, and I'd be like, oh, if he only knew how amazing these two kids are, because everything was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Maddox is doing this, or Marley. I'm like, they're kids, and they're amazing kids. But it kind of just took me balancing both of those. But for us, having Cash, our third, was by far and away the best thing. There was a period of time where I felt like, and to this day, so there's Cash and Ruby, who are Chris's only two biological children, and they're both hams, and they like eat up camera time, and they show up on my Instagram stories a ton.
Yeah.
And so I have to be hyper aware of that, and I have to make conscious attempts to compensate for that to Maddox and Marley in other ways, because I do know there was a period of time where Marley and Maddox felt like outsiders. And it was around the time when the babies needed me, like as a mom who's nursing, and I'm working and we're traveling for the show, and Maddox and Marley weren't with us as much. Yeah. That was really tough for them. But we are lucky in that we get the kids for a week and a half straight. And then they go to their dad's for 3 days, which is, for me, a dream. I would keep my kids 24/7 if I could, or maybe it's 4 days they go to Derek and they come stay with us again. They do feel like they miss out, and it is tough because they'll go to their dad's house, and of course they love their dad's house, but they see or they hear, and they have such a bond with Cash and Ruby. Yeah. I mean, it is you've seen. Yeah. They are in love with their two little siblings, and there's enough of a gap. There's two kids close to Maddox and Marley are a year and a half apart, and there's a 5-year gap, and then Cash and Ruby are a year and a half or two apart.
You just described my to a T.
Were you pretty close to your siblings?
Oh, absolutely. That was the bond, right? And parents aside, when you have those kids in the family, then that became the bond. And I was old enough that I think I was 7 when my sister was born. So I was old enough to really.
Totally Maddox.
Yeah. Oh, and I was in love. It was like, oh my God, that's my little sister, and being 7 and holding my little sister. I remember those things. And so that was the glue that kept the family together, even though there were all of those issues with the parents. It was having those 4 kids in the boat together, it's like this is the family.
That's interesting. And Chris actually does. So you mentioned maybe your stepdad or your dad didn't communicate and I think just naturally back in the day people didn't communicate that well. The line of work that we're in, obviously Chris is a great communicator. Yeah. And he does take advantage of any moment he can to, like, he and Maddox, he always says, we're bros, but I'm your dad first. Like I will discipline, and he disciplines Maddox and Marley the exact same way he disciplines Cash and Ruby. And which was hard for a while for him and for them, because they're like, who are you? But at the end of the day, we try and keep treatment even across the board. And if I am obviously the mom I tell Chris, they are all from my body, all 4 of these. So to me, if Cash is being a little shit, I'm going to get mad. He's in trouble. And I can kind of see times where Chris might be naturally favoring his kids, which is just natural. Mm-hmm. And he's super receptive to me saying, okay, listen, Maddox did the same thing last week and you got on his case for this, and now Cash is doing it and you're letting it slide. And so he's so good at being like, okay, I need to even the playing field. And he has to drop his ego enough to step outside and realize that naturally there may be a little bit of a bias towards your own kids, but he also knows he loves Maddox and Marley, and he'll say it, he loves them as much as he can possibly love any kids. Yeah. So that makes a huge difference.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? And we talked about this at dinner. Is so much of successful parenting, co-parenting, parenting after divorce is getting rid of your ego. Yeah. And being receptive to someone saying, hey, this is the issue, right? Because so many people, and I know this from divorced friends, from people going through the co-parenting thing, is we're so sometimes prone to reaction.
I know.
Oh, like, no, I'm not doing that. How dare you say that? Yeah. And so the takeaway from this, and thank you for bringing that up, is that successful parenting, co-parenting, any kind of thing, is getting rid of your ego.
It is. And tracking to Derek, because you had said, how did Derek kind of handle Chris coming in the picture? Yes. Derek and I actually, we were not, he had a really hard time with just me not, just the divorce.
Yeah.
And so he and I actually didn't communicate very well until Chris came in the picture.
Really?
Yep. And it wasn't until after. So Derek was very closed off to Chris, to the idea of another man. There was very little communication.
Yeah.
Drop off and pick up was like head down, drop off the kids, leave, until after Cash was born. Cash might have been about a year and a half old. And then I don't know what it was with Derek. I think he had just gone through some stuff in his own personal life. But for him, he had a shift, and and Chris and I would say, we're just going to be consistent. Our thing is consistent. We'll just try and love them. Loving doesn't mean getting away with things. It means, just loving and, hey, sometimes just being consistent.
Yeah.
And there was a noticeable shift about a year and a half or two after Cash was born, where Derek opened himself up to us, which was such a blessing for us. And we went through probably and there have been ups and downs and highs and lows. And we've had better times than we have now. And what I've noticed, though, is it's usually the co-parenting dynamic is as healthy as each individual parent, right? So if I'm healthy and I'm feeling great, but Derek's not healthy, or, maybe his life, he's having a hard time with career or job, the co-parenting dynamic doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And vice versa. If Derek's healthy and doing great, and I might be struggling and stressed and traveling, I am reactive, and the co-parenting dynamic does not work.
Yeah.
But now that the kids are old enough, it's really nice for them to be able to process it and talk about it. So even if things, because they're not always great, or always easy, I should say, they're able to process it and know now, like I have this standing thing. If they feel like, Dad's mad or I'm mad, my thing is, it is not your fault. You aren't the reason I'm not happy right now, or you are not the reason Dad's not happy right now. Whatever it is, you are perfect. You are doing great, because it's hard as parents not to take stuff out on our kids, because we see them the most. And when the co-parenting dynamic is broken, they do feel like it's their fault, and it's not.
That's interesting.
That's great advice, right?
It is. I was just going to ask you, what are some of from everything you've gone through, what are some of the biggest lessons you've taken away that maybe some of our listeners, can take away from all of this stuff that you've been through, from your divorce to, getting remarried and having more kids? Like, what are some of the biggest life lessons you've learned over the years?
I think the biggest one, well, there's a few.
Yeah.
The grass is not always greener on the other side.
Very true.
And that's not because, I went through a divorce and I wish I wouldn't have, but I do think a lot of people naturally think a divorce is right for them. The grass is greener where you water it.
I love that.
Because I'm married to Chris now, who is 100%. We had this conversation last night. I feel like he's my soulmate, but it's still, we will break. We will not last if we are not watering it. If I'm not loyal to him, if I'm not practicing the things that I know create a healthy relationship, we won't last, and that magic will be gone. I will have sacrificed happiness forever for what I wanted in the moment. And I think that's really important, because going through a divorce, identifying, am I doing this because I think someone's going to make me happier, or am I doing this because I believe I have something to learn about myself and this other person's hindering me? I think that's really important. Focusing on yourself. I know, Drew, like you've talked about a lot. After your divorce, that was your time to really learn about yourself.
Yeah.
You are a different person today than I met on season 3 of the show.
Yeah.
In the best way. But you were amazing back then. But like every time Chris and I see you, we're like, gosh, like that guy is so awesome. He's just, you're a good person. And you can tell you focused a lot on not letting your ego run you, learn about yourself, and figure out self-love.
I love that. And I think, thank you for sharing that and for the compliment. I think a lot of it is, people don't spend the time to date themselves after divorce, right? They look for someone else to complete them, like we talked about last night.
Yep.
Freaking Jerry Maguire.
You complete me.
You had me at hello.
Show me the money. I know, that's the problem, is we are kind of a product of our environment. We watch those movies, and those, that kind of becomes the expectations of our life. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do now, is I want that type of love that I see in the movies, right?
Well, and think of that. How many, after that movie came out, how many people were so excited to hear the words, you complete me? But when you really peel back the layers, all you're saying is, I'm codependent. I mean, literally, that's what that person was saying. Like, that's not romantic.
Therapy.
I'm codependent.
I need therapy.
Yeah.
I'm not a complete individual. Thank you for coming in and rescuing me. It's like, wow, we perpetuated that.
It's so
and I love
true.
Cameron Crowe, but damn it, Cameron, come on.
It's true. And then, I mean, talking about what you see on TV and movies and thinking that that's reality, there's a part of me that has a little bit of guilt because when someone looks at my Instagram, people will say all over the place, relationship goals. Like Chris and I have this inside joke. We always say hashtag relationship goals because it might appear that way, right, to the outside, and I wouldn't want to be in any other relationship. But you have a little glimpse, Drew, into the struggles that we've dealt with. And I mean, there are a lot of different dynamics of our marriage and our history that probably would have broken up 99% of marriages, which that's another thing I've learned from this is, and you've said this too, you can make it work with many people, right? Mm-hmm. And you can find happiness with many people, but you have to be willing to put in the effort and the time, and you have to have the fortitude and perseverance. Like with Chris, again, either one of us could have thrown our hands up a handful of times and we could be no longer me and Chris. Yeah. And honestly, that would have been a lot easier a few of the times. But sticking through it and actually putting in that energy and that time.
Watering the grass.
Yes. Yeah. Watering the grass, it makes a difference. And the longer you can water the grass and the more you can, like our next door neighbor is so awesome, Sonny. Yeah, he's also our partner. And just seeing how him and his wife are, and even how he is as a business partner, like the lessons he's taught me, I'm like, gosh, that's a good way to look at it. He'll say, listen, we're partners. Like, we are partners and we're not going anywhere. So let's figure this shit out. Like, and I love that because in my mind, I see how he is as a partner. He's like, we can fight, we can disagree, we can hate each other for a minute, but we're going to figure it out because we're committed to each other. And he lives that way in his marriage too. And I love the example that it is because the more you fight and the more you struggle and the more you figure it out, the stronger you both become. So beyond every massive struggle in your marriage, there is like a huge pot of gold. There's like a rainbow that you're sliding down. I mean, there really is a massive payoff. That's what carves who we are.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You know, I'm sitting between, this is Evan. I'm sitting between two people who have a collective body fat percentage of about 4.5. and we look at the physical struggles that it takes to get where you guys are at physically, right? Yeah. And it's funny because relationships are a lot of the same way. You don't get to where you're at by sitting on your couch eating bonbons and watching Jerry Springer. If that's still a thing, I don't know.
I don't know.
Actually,
is
I don't know.
I certainly hope so.
I hope not.
It's like throwing blows.
So entertaining.
I know.
You know what? You're better off listening to Single Daddy Daily.
Exactly.
But it's funny because we talk about struggles creating that opportunity for growth, and it's the same thing. It's, you know, you're building muscle, you're building a body, you're building a physique, you're building all of these things, and that doesn't come from not putting in the hard work. And relationships are absolutely the same way. So we talk about watering the grass. We talked about it last night. Love is a verb.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the thing that I learned after my marriage is I was a product of Hollywood. I was, you know, it's like, oh, you complete me. You know, it's The Notebook. You came back.
Titanic.
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah. I'll never let go, Jack.
What was her name again? I can't
Rose.
think of it.
Rose. Wow, he remembers.
Princess Bride. It's like Wesley.
Princess Bride.
You were like Wesley, right?
Yes.
As you wish.
As you wish. Death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it.
You are a product of Hollywood.
But yeah, but that's the problem, right? Is there's that idea that and they live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And the reality is that great love, great romances, great relationships are not they live happily ever after. It's okay, they worked every single day. They woke up and made that person a priority every single day. And whether that's with your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids. And that's what divorce really should teach us is not only self-love, but that love in context has to come with the work that we want.
Yeah.
It's watering the grass.
And you can translate that same teaching to, now I know this isn't a business podcast, but we all have businesses. It's business too. It's like people thinking you're an overnight success. You know, it's like, oh, Drew got this show. He gained all this weight, lost it again, and then bam, he's like mega famous and making millions of dollars. But what they didn't see is the decade that you put in leading up to that point. Right? And they don't see the struggle beyond success, like what people perceive as success. And same goes with a marriage. So it's the same all around.
I joke it's, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success.
And I'm still working at it. Same. It's been a decade.
I'm 38.
So you're right there. You're right there.
Tomorrow.
38 years.
I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to be an overnight success.
Well, okay, hold on. So you're 38. I have no compunction about this whatsoever.
If the microphone could see my face.
Are we going out for
right
cellular
now.
age or
cellular age? We're going to talk about.
Did you ever see that Dr. Oz show where he did the age of your vagina?
No.
Did you? You have to pull it up on YouTube.
No.
If you got to cut this from here, I totally understand.
No.
But he actually pulled a woman on his show, and it was like probably similar to what you have done, like the cellular age of, whatever. And it gave her the age of her vagina.
How old was her vagina?
She was probably a 35-year-old woman, and it was like 76.
76-year-old vagina?
He's all right, Rose, the age of your vagina is, and there's like a big thing on the back, and he's all 76 years old. Like,
oh, that's
you
embarrassing
have to
for her.
pull
Poor
that
lady.
clip up. I know.
Wait, so the transition
then I think
was
it went to like what you can do,
Yeah.
Kegels, and it was like
Oh,
obviously,
shot.
so, yeah.
Oh,
there we go.
yes, there we go.
Where'd it go? There it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
So wait, we're not going to talk about the age of your vagina. That seems
No.
weird. I was just going to ask how old you were.
4 babies. I don't think we want to talk about the age.
That's a factor.
I need this right here.
Heidi's 36, 35.
I
32.
love you. 29?
29. She's getting younger.
37.
37.
Yeah.
37, 38.
38.
All right.
But
39.
I
For
look
another
a
2
little
days.
bit
For another
older.
2 days.
Another
Evan
2 days,
turns
and then I'll
big
be 40.
40.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Happy for HBD.
Yeah. 40.
My mom
Is that
looks
an
about my
STD?
name.
HBD.
I have a 14-year-old, so I know all of the little acronyms. HBD
Yes.
is happy birthday.
Oh.
Oh.
It should be HB because birthday is one word, but they do HBD.
Yeah.
LOL.
LOL.
Yeah.
BRB. Be right back. FMLOA or whatever the hell.
OMW.
OMG.
OMG.
Oh, I say OMG a lot.
OMW is on my way.
Oh.
You know that?
No.
Wow.
RN is right now.
Yeah.
So
thought
Maddox
that was
will text me and
registered
say, so did I. Maddox texted me and said, what are you doing, RN? And I'm like,
Registered
I'm not
nurse.
a nurse. And he's like, Mom, it's right now. What are you doing right now?
You know what?
Yeah.
We're so old. Sorry.
We really are. You know, this is the one that kills me, though. I'm going to hop on my soapbox. I do this from time to
I
time.
like soapboxes.
The new generation likes to say K instead of okay.
Yeah.
My
Right?
question is,
Because-
what are
What if
you
I
doing?
say
What are they doing
I
with
say
because-
You just say K, right?
Okay.
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 My question
Okay.
is,
I
what are you doing with all the free time that you save by not putting the O in front of that?
Okay. On text, I actually text OKAY. I don't even do
Oh.
okay. If you search the word
Okay.
okay on text, I can't. I have a hard time abbreviating. I don't feel
Yeah.
proper. But I agree with you. It's like
So
Did we
glad-
really have to abbreviate okay?
KCUZ, cuz.
I'm so glad we're
freaking
talking
lazy
about
are
this.
BOUT. It's like the younger generation. I'm learning a lot from my kids.
It's all about efficiency.
It is
You know,
about
if you can get the same message across in a short amount of time, it's like, boom, that's efficient.
You know, Einstein
it.
said something along those lines, right? It's like, you know, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then it's too complicated.
Yeah.
But I still think that you
Or
can
you don't
say,
truly understand it.
Yeah.
yeah, I still think okay is okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Because, why? Instead of because.
guys,
Because, K.
we've got to run. We've run long on this.
Have
Yes,
we, wait, have we really?
Yeah, we all got to catch flights.
No.
But
Come
here's
on,
the thing.
guys.
First of all, I want to say thank you to Heidi, like seriously, for coming on. And this whole podcast, what we're trying to do, Evan and I, is to help navigate these waters of how difficult single parenthood can be. Whether, you know, you're married, just being a parent in general is a lot of work and takes a lot of ups and downs and learning and growing and, you know, relearning
Yeah.
sometimes the same lessons and making the same mistakes. And so it's cool to bring people on like you. We hope to bring Chris on eventually for what it was like for him to go through all this and where he's at today. But, you know, thank you so much for coming on. You definitely open up our eyes to
Absolutely.
a lot of new things and giving us hope.
Oh,
you know,
you're welcome.
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows?
There's, you guys are going to, you guys are both catches. You're going to
Well,
find
thank
good
you.
girls.
We'll see.
That will love your babies. You will.
Thank you.
Thank
well, you know, it
If you want it. I mean, if you don't,
It is a
I don't
choice.
wish that upon you.
and that's the challenge. We talked about it today. We talked about it last night. But there comes a point, and this goes out to everyone on this podcast, everyone listening, is that out of a divorce, there's that, am I broken? Can I learn to love again? Can I trust someone again? Can I bring someone into the
Yep.
fold with my kids? And there's no yes or no. There's no right or wrong answer. You've done it successfully. You've talked about watering the grass and how hard it is to do that. But for all intents and purposes, you know, we love what you've done with Chris and exemplify what a successful post-divorce relationship can be like. Whether or not that's in the cards for Drew and I remains to be seen. Maybe we'll tackle that in season 2 of Single Daddy Daily.
Yeah, we'll keep you guys posted on our love lives or lack of.
But the exciting thing about this, and what I was, you literally brought up an entire season worth of stuff to talk about.
100%.
And so I don't know about you, but I think we got to do this again. Right?
I think we need to.
Yeah.
We will.
I'm in.
We will.
I'm in.
We'll have you and Chris on next time. Both of you
Okay,
guys.
that would
That'd
be great.
Really cool.
And then
conversation.
then you should have him on without me so we can say how he really feels about me.
Yes. Ooh, there we go. Like, Heidi's not going to listen to this. Say what you want.
You know what
All
I
right.
think we should do is we should have your kids on.
Oh, that would
idea.
it would be good, I think, for listeners to hear what really goes on inside of a child's mind. And it would actually, I would listen to anyone's child
If they're
going
open to
through
it.
something like that, just to get insight. Like hearing from you today, Evan, about what it was like for you growing up really resonated and like stuck in my, and will stick in my brain, because it's I don't know, I'm not in their shoes.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's the thing about this, right? Is it's easy to focus on us, but oftentimes, and especially with the pain and the torment and the feelings of guilt and failure from a failed marriage, it's easy to focus on us. But then we got to stay, stay there for the kids and stay positive. One of the things that really hit home for me is the success of your co-parenting relationship depends on the success of that other person, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link. Mike, if you could really think about that, all the people that are suffering with the I hate my ex, that person's an asshole, whatnot. It's like, can you imagine if you were to reframe that and recognize that how your kids navigate these waters, the success of your co-parenting relationship depends greatly on how you treat that other person, how you empathize with that other person and cultivate that relationship. That alone would probably put half of the divorce lawyers out of work.
It would.
And I would consider myself...
You'd be happy with that.
I would be happy
It
with
would,
that,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, I'm all, gosh, I mean, there's so much I wanted to, but yeah, it's true. And I think it's important for parents to know that just because your ex might be treating you poorly, you don't have to treat them poorly back.
Kill them with kindness.
That is my philosophy. And it might come across sometimes as condescending, or not condescending. It might come across as inauthentic because the other person's in such a dark, hard place. Yeah. But the kinder you can be, and the more you can know that it's not your fault, and let your kids know too, hey, you're perfect. You're just because we're not communicating well doesn't mean you're broken. Yeah. That I think that is the most important thing, letting your kids know that they're loved no matter what.
Well, and think of what that teaches your kids, how to you're modeling the best type of communication and conflict resolution.
Yeah.
That if nothing else, think of it that way. You're teaching your kids probably one of the most successful life skills they could get.
Thank you.
Man, so many other things we would love to talk about, but
Drew's
we'll cut it
let's
off.
It's like, pull the mic.
Well, I know Evan's got an earlier flight than us. We're good, but I feel bad because he's got a flight earlier than us. But no, seriously, thank you for coming on SDD, which is single. We gotta change that
Single
acronym.
Daddy Daily.
SDD.
K. SDD. We got to change that up. We got to come up with a different acronym. But really appreciate it, Heidi. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week on the Single Daddy's Daily Podcast, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks for tuning in to Single Daddy's Daily, hosted by Evan DeMarco and Drew Manning. We are recorded at the Village Workspaces podcast studio in Los Angeles, California. This podcast has been produced by Katya Levchenko. If you like what you hear, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast, rate and review it on iTunes, and follow us on Twitter at SingleDadDaily and Instagram at SingleDaddyDaily. Help spread the word and let us know what you think of the show. Make sure to tune in for our next episode, which will be right here in your podcast feed. Until next time.